Success is what comes after you stop making excuses. That is a quote by Louis Galarza. I have the best guest ever today, and I'm so excited to welcome Johnny Ward. Hi, Johnny.
Hey Lois, how you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Johnny is just the most amazing adventurer and travel blogger. And I'm just so privileged to say that I know him and I have traveled with him. And he's just got so many stories to share. Johnny was the first person to visit every country, plus do the Explorer's Grand Slam. And the Explorer's Grand Slam is an adventure goal to reach the North Pole, the South Pole, as well as climbing the 7 summits. He has also rowed across the Atlantic Ocean, spending 51 days on a rowboat on a meat-free expedition. He's done marathons, the North Pole marathons, ultra marathons. Oh, he's just out there doing the most amazing adventures. And he's really just quite an incredible individual. He also has a non-profit travel company called Mudita Adventures. And this is a fantastic organization where they go around the country traveling, but giving back. They build schools and dormitories and playgrounds and clinics in developing communities. Wow, John, Johnny, you're just absolutely phenomenal.
Thank you. I don't know how to follow that up, but thank you, Lois.
So I met Johnny when he was on his attempt to get to Yemen, and I was on my attempt to get to Yemen, and I couldn't get there, but he did by, I don't know, stowing away or bribing him, bribing to get onto a cement ship that went over to Socotra Island. I was so jealous when you got there.
Yeah.
And then I also traveled with Johnny to Iraq. So, wow, I mean, he's got stories. We could actually spend the whole day just chatting. But, Johnny, I would like to know about how you have maybe made a mistake or failed or not achieved something.
Well, Lois, you know a bit about my background from our travels together, but of course I've made many mistakes like across the way, like for my journey to every country and then the 7 summits and stuff. But like I had a tricky upbringing, as you well know. You also know my mom. I grew up on welfare, and my father was in prison, and blah blah blah, and he wasn't around. And being able to do all the things that you just spoke about, like I have the emotional support of my mom, which is priceless, but no financial support and no practical help. She obviously, what does she know about Everest, or what does anyone know about Everest or South Pole? No, I have to figure out all myself. So the thing I'm most proud of with all that is like starting from zero, really. Like when I was 22 and I graduated university, I just turned 40 recently. So it's been 18 years of building up like the ability to do those physical challenges, the resilience to keep going for every country, like through various arrests and illnesses, and being able to afford it, being able to build a business that allowed me to be able to afford to do those things without having to sell my life to a corporate career. I feel very proud that I am now where I am, and my wife is actually pregnant at the moment, and I'm also very proud that I'm going to be able to give my kid a big leg up. He won't be starting from zero, so I'm excited to see the life that he's going to be able to live from a different start point.
Oh, congratulations on the baby. This is so exciting.
Thank you.
Fabulous. So, so you started with nothing. So you really just put your head down and you just made it happen.
That's it. I graduated uni, and my mum actually had very little money, but she did actually help me pay for my rent and everything at uni, even though she barely had two pennies to rub together. And she always had my back. So once I finished uni, where everyone else was going to get a real job or whatever, my mum always really supported me to follow my dream. So I ended up teaching English in Asia, in both Thailand and in Korea. And then I always planned really to go back and try to make some money in the corporate world, but I fell in love with like this adventurous lifestyle, and I set myself a goal of trying to visit 100 countries before I was 30. And then I did that. And then I started my blog, which allowed me to make a little bit of money online and allowed me to not have to get the real job. And through obviously the emotional support of my mom and my family, that when I was still broke at 28, 29, I was under no pressure to get a real job, as people would say. And that allowed me to kick on to be where I am now. Um, and it's tough, you know, like especially every country thing is like an interesting goal because you know when people hear about every country, people who've traveled a lot, like yourself, when you think about every country, like if you've traveled a lot, you think about the dangerous places like in Somalia or South Sudan and Congo, and you're like, especially you coming from the African continent, Lois. But if you tell like Westerners or North Americans about every country, like the image that's conjured in their heads is pina coladas in Cancun and like 5-star resorts in Bali. And I understand, like, of course, that's what you think about when you think about traveling. But if you've traveled a lot, it doesn't mean that. It means like risking your life and getting sick and being in car crashes and fighting with visas and embassies. That was the real reality of the every country thing. And that was a struggle. That took me basically full-time travel because my job was my blog. So that took me from 2006 to 2017. It was 11 years of like graft, basically.
And your blog is fantastic. Tell us a little bit about your blog.
I just it was a bit it renders me speechless, as you can see. It just changed my life. I wanted to showcase how you can come from a single parent family and don't have a trust fund or any of this kind of shit and still live a cool life. Like I was teaching in Thailand for $500 or $600 a month or whatever it was, and I was still loving my life. I was in my 20s, and you don't need money to be overseas. You need some, of course, which is why I was working, but you don't need to doesn't need to look like a movie. I was living in some little shitty hovel, but I was loving my life. I felt alive, and that's what gave me the injection. Like it makes you feel like you're doing something, exploring other cultures, eating weird food, like getting confused with currencies and languages. I loved it. And I wanted a way to show other people in a situation like mine that, like, listen, you don't need to have a big payday from your mum or dad to go and do some cool stuff. Sure, it might be a bit rough around the edges. It might not be so comfortable, but if you want to live an adventure, you can do it. And I wanted my blog to show other people, like from similar backgrounds, that they could do something cool too. And then over the course of time, it ended up being monetized, and I never thought it would end up being my job in a loose sense. And to this day, like 18 years later or whatever, I'm still cracking on with it.
Wow, that's wonderful. And the name of your blog is?
So my surname is Ward, Johnny Ward. So my blog is One Step Forward with the number 4. Yeah.
Folks, really, it's worth following and reading his blogs. I mean, Johnny has done the most amazing trips and adventures, and he has supported his mother doing climbing Mount Fuji and so many things you've done. And I love the riding the iron ore train.
Yeah, that's cool. You know, I'm going back to it's in Mauritania through the Sahara. I'm going back in December. I really want to make it the next chapter of my life, like doing all this cool stuff that I've done. Like I'm just a normal person who made a decision to do not normal stuff, right? And anyone can make that decision. And I truly believe that with all my heart. So I want to create these events that are like painful and dark and self-loathing, but people will find themselves on the other side of it. So I'm organizing a yearly ultra marathon in Mauritania. So you'll run 160 kilometers, 100 miles across the Sahara, and then take the iron ore train back to land, back to the coast.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
It's certainly one trip I will not be joining you on.
You never know. In another life.
In another life. But I'd like to know about a failure you've had, a mistake you've made.
I mean, I've had plenty from business, even on the business side. We'll get into the actual like big failures, but you know, when you start talking about going to the North Pole, South Pole, Everest and stuff, of course it takes a lot of training, years of physical training to be fit enough. But it costs a fortune. And I've had many failed online attempts at businesses. Like I've had 3 failed startups that I pumped money into, lost, pumped money into, lost, pumped money into, lost, despair. You know, it's very easy for people to follow your Instagram or whatever and see like your nice house and your nice life now at 40. They don't see the sleepless nights when you start something, pump all your time and money into, fail. Start something, pump all your fail again. Yeah, and I've had many failed online attempts to make my fortune. And it's hard to keep picking yourself up. But you know, like much it it gets easier in the same way that like if you're going to run ultra marathons or cycle across continents or whatever, the first time you do something epic makes the second time more believable because you know that like the first time you're going into the darkness and then when you achieve it you're like, oh wow, I can achieve anything. And the same with business as well. When you failed once and come back, then you realize like if you fail a second or a third time, it actually gets easier, you know, because you know that you can come back. And I've done that. So but at the time it doesn't feel like that, of course. But in terms of actual big failures in my life, I'm a type A personality. I think anyone that does these kind of stupid like things, dedicates their life to these physical goals or whatever, is often type A. Like you're very driven, often quite selfish with it. Like you set your goal and you're hyper focused for better or worse. And with the 7 summits, then that's the highest mountain in every continent. Uh, when you set a goal where the success and failure is so binary, um, it puts a lot of pressure on yourself. And then me also as a blogger, as like a small time public figure, it means I've got even more pressure because I've stood with my chest out and said I'm going to do this. And so the 7 mountains plus 2 or 3 disputed mountains, so there's 9 or 10 all in if you want to really feel like you've done it properly. And the first 4 or 5 I did were all right. Hard and expensive, but all right. And then there's a mountain in the Andes, I think it's in the Andes in Argentina, on the Argentina-Chilean border called Aconcagua. It's the highest mountain outside of Hindu Kush and Himalayas, 7,000 meters, just shy, so like 23,000 feet or something, which is quite high. It feels less high now. I've just done bloody Everest last year, but at the time it felt higher. Um, and I trained for 6 months with a buddy of mine, actually. We trained in Thailand, paused all my travels, paused all my business. I trained for 6 months, paid the money, 10 grand, whatever it was, and flew to Argentina. And that was December, no, it was January 2019, 5 years ago. And we were on the mountain for a month, and it was maybe my 5th of my 7 summits. And you just think, like, when you're 4 for 4, in my mind, I had strategically been, and then I'll do this one, and then I'll do this one, and I'll do this one, and you see your runway for success, and then it all came tumbling down. We got evacuated off the mountain. There was huge snowstorms. People were dying at high camp, and we got evacuated off the mountain. And the thing about these mountains is they're seasonal. You can only go in the summer. It's minus bloody 40 with 100-kilometer winds and all in the summer. So you can't really do it in the winter. Certainly not me. Like I'm not a world-class mountaineer. I wouldn't say like I can suffer well, but there's people 10 times better than me. So I'm not good enough to climb it in the winter. So that was January. We went back to Mendoza, which is the city that is nearest to the mountain. And I just drunk bloody 10 liters of red wine, Mendoza red wine, for about a week, crying into my wine glass with my best mate. He also failed. And then we flew back here in January, flew back to Thailand. He lives in Thailand here in Chiang Mai with me. And on the day before I flew back, I just signed up to do it literally the following year. And that year, that was the year of 2019, that just hung over me because I'd finished every country in 2017. I'd been to the North Pole in 2018, and then I'd started the 7 summits journey, and I'd failed within 18 months, like summit number 4. And I couldn't, so it was January, as I say, I couldn't climb it again until December later on that year. And that year was just hell for me. Like if you have that type A personality, all I could think about was like, I hate to wish my life away. I love my life and I'm grateful that I've got my health and I'm grateful that my business works. And I'm grateful that I'm married to a lovely lady. And all I wanted to do is just fast forward 10 months. Like I just clicked my fingers, and it's a terrible thing to say, but that's how I felt. And I felt like that every day for the whole 10 months.
How did you overcome that?
I mean, This time I trained even harder, if that was even possible. So I was in like world-class fitness, ready for it. And I mean, I guess on a technical level, I overcame it because when I went back, I successfully summited. But emotionally, like I didn't really overcome it that during those 10 months. It was just eyes on the prize. Wake up every morning, put my sneakers on, train for 10 months. And I just knew that if that snowstorm, I wasn't going to leave the mountain. I was going to what I was going to do the following year, like when I did it, I literally wasn't leaving Argentina until I climbed the mountain. I had brought enough food to stay there for months. And I was literally wasn't going to leave the mountain. It was the same when I went to Yemen that time when I had to take that cargo ship during the war. It was my seventh attempt or whatever, and the plane got turned around, and it was my second last country, and I just didn't leave. I went to the border. I went to Oman, which borders Yemen, and I said I'm not leaving Oman until I get on one of those boats that takes me to Yemen. And I stayed there for weeks or months or whatever it was until I got on one. And I think when you've got that mentality, again, it's selfish and it's like self-driven and it's egotistical. But if you really hold on to it, like whatever success you're looking for, you'll reach.
I wish you had driven me to do that and join you on that cargo ship to Yemen.
Yeah.
I've never got there, and I'm really sorry. I don't know whether I'll get there now.
Oh, you still can. Much easier now.
I'm living now at the south of the world, and it's just so far away.
Hmm.
Johnny, what advice can you give anybody who's hit that brick wall, who's faced that failure?
As I said to you last week, Lois, this is quite abrasive for people, but I mean, it's how I live my life. It's how I've earned my successes. Like I'm a tough love guy. I've got no time for people's sob stories. I mean, that's why only when I do podcasts or media interviews, like I mention my upbringing briefly and move on to the rest of my life because yeah, like I've also got a sob story. What should I do? Scream it from the top of my lungs every day? No one cares. The internet's there. If you can speak English, you've got an internet connection. You know which healthy foods to eat. You can buy a pair of sneakers for $10, get out and get healthy, get fit, eat well, and there's nothing holding you back. It's literally yourself. And I felt like that for myself when I failed the mountain, when I couldn't get into Yemen, blah blah blah. No one cares about your problems. Like everyone's got problems, and you know that old cliche about how if we all had our own wrote our problems in a pile and put it in the middle, you'd end up choosing your own problems because a lot of people are a lot worse off. And I, I feel like in 2024 and the era of social media, the rise of narcissism, everyone feels like they're the main character and poor them. And I just have so little time for it because the world's a beautiful place. It's full of so many opportunities. And if you're fortunate enough, as I say, to be able to walk on your 2 feet and you've got an internet connection, there is literally nothing stopping you from doing anything you want. So it's not a case of hitting rock bottom and all this in my mind. I just think like, get over yourself. What are you going to do? Life's such a gift, and to watch people waste it when they're literally capable of anything, I find infuriating. I was going to say frustrating, but it actually makes me angry because someone like you who's traveled so much and now like you're struggling with your mobility, like you made the most and did a lot of cool trips. I'm sure you would testify to what I'm saying too. So to hear someone 25 years old, 35 years old, whatever, complaining about how hard it is when they've got their health, they've got decades ahead of them to make money, it's nonsense. Get out there and do what you want to do. And if you want to sit at home and play PlayStation or watch Netflix 18 hours a day and do nothing with your life, then do that. But don't ever dare complain about it.
Wonderful. So your statement that you made, overcome, persist, succeed, excuses don't matter.
That's it.
No excuses. You're such an inspiration, Johnny, and I just advise everybody to follow you, follow your blog, travel with you. You will have the most amazing. John is just the most amazing travel guide and host, and he's friendly and helpful and kind. He's just, I'm so privileged to say that I know Johnny and I've traveled with him. Guys, you will not be sorry. Go for it.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thanks very much for your time, Johnny. I know you're extremely busy. I
Yeah,
appreciate
I'm
you
under the
being
cosh.
here.
Yeah, thank you. Lovely to see you again, though.
Lovely to chat. Thank you, Johnny, and good luck with all the baby and all the
Need it.
new adventures that are on the card.